It's not 10% more, which means 4 days in 2 hours. From 4 days, it became 60 days. Is it understood? Yes or no? Now, what about you? Not the same? When you're doing it? Of course. Worse. Of course. Which means, when we are talking about not meeting on time, what is the biggest killer in multi-project? The biggest killer is bad multitasking. Moreover, what happens now to our time estimates? You are coming to me and say, how much time it will take you to write an article? What do you want me to say? 4 days? Forget it. I will say, I don't know. Then you'll press on me, and then I will say, depends how much you will bother me with other things. And that's correct. But still you will insist of an answer. Then I will tell you, fine, 2 months. You see, I will factor in the fact that you are going to interrupt me with other things. That's me. What about you? You will not do the same? And what about the people which are in project? You think in multi-project environment, you think that they are not doing the same? Which means all the estimations of time are out of whack. Pure, it should have taken 2 days, minimum 10 days estimation. Why? Because it will take more. What's the result of all of that? When we take 3 projects, the same projects that we've seen before, we multiply it 3 times. We lower the load a little bit on the red, and we simulate it 100 times. Now remember, each one of these projects, if we are looking on the time of each task with 50% probability, we should have finished in 70 days. But this is not realistic. Okay? When we double the times, okay, huge amount of safety, we should have finished easily in 140 days. Remember, when the single project ran, we had about 40% chance of finishing in 140 days. When 3 projects are running under the matrix, this is what our computer tells us. 50% chance to finish it in 370 days, each one of them. And this is under almost ideal situations relative to reality. Oh, by the way, don't promise 370, because in more than 10% of the cases, it takes more than 430 days. And if you notice, all of them comes out at about the same time. Phenomenal problem in terms of performance, but at the same time, it's good news. Why it's good news? What we've seen is we factored in enormous safety already. But the ways that we are managing is causing all this safety to go down the drain. Maybe there is another way to manage. So all these safeties that we already factor in will become effective. And remember what was, where all this started. Do you remember it still? It all started from what? We thought that the only way to guarantee the project completing on time was by insisting and putting efforts that each task will complete on time. Do we care if each task will complete on time? Who cares as long as the whole project completes on time? Maybe there is another way that we do it. Because what we've seen already is that if we do insist that each task will complete on time, we ourselves create a situation where no matter how much safety we put in, it's wasted. Is it understood? Yes or no? Maybe there is another way. And of course there is another way, otherwise I wouldn't have stood here and lecture, right? Fine, we found the problem. The problem is we are managing the project as if the best way to manage the project is by concentrating that each task will done optimally, will finish on time. That's the problem. Now what we'll have to do is to find the solution. Because now we know this assumption that the way to really do the project on time is by concentrating on each task is wrong. That's opened the gate to start to find how should we manage it. Where we remember one thing, we don't care if each individual task will not finish on time, as long as the whole project finishes on time. Okay? So let's make a break. You will concentrate on your writing the questions if you want, that I will answer some. And immediately after the break, the 15 minutes break, we will develop together the solution. Once again, don't be surprised, the solution is very simple. as usual. See you in 15 minutes.
We now have a 15-minute break.
So, what is the solution? Very nice to start like that, but what is the solution? Let's go again. What we saw here is that the problem is actually a negative loop. We are having to give estimates. We know that we are going to be judged how well we are standing in our own estimates. We are giving, then we are padding ourselves because we don't want to give something that we have more than 50% chance of, or 50% chance of not meeting, because otherwise we are not realistic and not reliable. We give more, but due to the fact that we have done that, we have seen all the cause and effect connections, and then what do we see? We see that in spite of the fact that everybody is padding its own task, the whole project does not finish on time. We are blamed. We've learned our lesson. Next time we have to put even bigger estimates, and things becomes worse and worse until there is a limit imposed by the external world, which is, sorry, if that's really your estimate, no project. A vicious cycle. We have to reverse this vicious cycle. Don't expect to do it in one shot, but it's obvious that the only way to reverse a vicious cycle is that at least one of the actions that we will have to take in the future is opposite of the actions that we are taking today. That's the only way to reverse a vicious cycle. One of the actions will have to be counterintuitive. In other words, it will have to be the opposite of what we are doing now. In order to explain what is the meaning of taking an action which is counterintuitive in order to reverse a vicious cycle, let me tell you a story. It's not a story. It's a real case. And the case is about a very involved project called the big maintenance of the F-16s in the Israeli Air Force. You see, F-16 you fly, after each certain hours of flight has to go through maintenance, and more hours of flight has to go through more maintenance. But there comes a time after certain hours of flight where it goes through a huge overhaul. You are putting it in the depot. They are disassembling the F-16 totally. They even sandblast the paint. Each portion is disassembled. Everything is checked. What has to be replaced is replaced. What has to be fixed is fixed in the large sub-depots that they have there. And then it has to be reassembled together. Now, do you know what's the meaning of reassembling an F-16? It's not exactly a matter of a day or two. Okay? It's a huge project, of course. And it takes time. Now, like every army, when you are coming to put a new weapon system, you decide on so many aeroplanes, and because of it, such a size of a depot. And then reality is changing a little bit, and then you are buying more aeroplanes, but you don't have then the budget to enlarge the depot, and now you have some problems of maintaining, and then you push the envelope of the flight. In other words, let's fly the aeroplanes a little bit more. And then when they're coming to the depot, of course, there is more damage and more wear and tear, so it takes more time to correct them, and you are in this nice loop. In this case, there was even something worse than that. I don't know if you heard about it, but have you heard about Desert Storm? Okay. In Desert Storm, we, as Israelis, we got some missiles from Iraq as gifts. And you know what is a way to provoke an Israeli? Just threaten him or send a missile on him, and you get immediately the counter reaction. But this time the Americans have really asked us not to do it. And between you and me, I don't know to what extent it's correct, but I think it's correct, so don't take it as a gospel. But if I'm not mistaken, the Americans have bribed us not to attack Iraq. And they bribed us with F-16s. Since Americans are very smart, they didn't give us new F-16s. They gave us F-16s that has to go to this maintenance where they knew that the depot is already blocked. And these F-16s were waiting for a long time. It was a huge problem. This was one of the places, the first places that the Israeli Air Force have used the project management, the TOC way, to rectify things. And let me tell you not about the whole thing, but about one single aspect in that project, which is when you're disassembling and you find something that has to be repaired or replaced. Of course, how do you know if it has to be repaired or replaced? They are working by the book. And they're really working by the book. Because you don't want to find a quality problem when you are flying in 2 Mach at who knows what height, and then to find a quality problem. Okay? Unfortunately, reality is so diverse that the books do not cover every possible scenario. What happens when they find something that is not covered by the book? For that, there are special engineers, a whole department of them. Here I will quote numbers which are not exact. I simply don't know if I'm allowed to quote them or not. Let's say that it's 70 engineers. The ballpark is about, who knows. So when there is a problem that is not covered by the book, it's moved to this department, engineer is assigned, and this engineer has to say what should be done, and he has to follow it in the job shops and in the assembly line up to the point where he's signed, it's done, everything is fine. Only then his involvement is finished. Now, things which are not covered by the book per each aeroplane are hundreds. You can imagine how complex the whole situation is. So this department is very loaded. Whenever the problem arrives, it's assigned to an engineer. Now what happens? The engineer works on it. Then he has to go to one of the job shops of repair or to the line in order to see and to explain how it should be done and to supervise it. He comes to the line. Right now they're busy doing something else. So what is he doing? He's going back to work on another problem. And then he reaches the stage where he goes to one of the workshops to show it and so on. They're busy. What is he doing? Going back to work on another problem. The lead time expense. Remember, lead time expense, but at the same time, all the time, new problems are coming. So more and more problems are assigned. If he has now more problems, he's doing more multitasking. If he's doing more multitasking, the lead time expense even more. If the lead time expense even more, there's more problems. Do you see the beautiful vicious cycle? Now, reality is that on the table of each one of these 70 engineers, there is minimum 50 open problems. 50. And the lead time expands, of course, when you have bad multitasking. How much is it? This was a real number. The average time that each problem took from the minutes that it was identified until it was closed, the average time was over 135 days. Which means, you can imagine, there were aeroplanes that couldn't have been returned to the Air Force because of 1 or 2 problems which are still open. Huge problem. They've tried to solve it in any possible way. For example, this department of these 70 engineers was the only one who was allowed to go as many overtime hours as they want. No need for authorization a priori. But there is a limit to the how much overtime people can work, so they're going down. They were allowed to hire more engineers. But there is a limit to how many engineers like that you'll find. These are the best, most experienced engineers. Okay? They've tried everything, and that's what happened. Now what do you do? Well, what do you think has to be done? How do you reverse the vicious cycle? Let me repeat again the vicious cycle. More problem, more bad multitasking. More bad multitasking, more time until you solve a problem. More time until you solve a problem, more problems. And so on and so forth. Their solution was very simple. They said, no engineer will be assigned more than 3 problems, period. Which means the problems are arriving to the department, but now they are not assigned to engineers. Only 3 problems per engineer are assigned. When is a new problem assigned? When the engineer finished and checked, only then he gets a new problem. And what happened when he's stuck on the first problem and second and third? Wait. What do you mean wait? We don't have enough engineers. Wait. Totally counterintuitive, right? Now what really happened in reality? First of all, you can understand how much the lead time shrank. Let me just show you what is the mechanism here. I worked on the first problem and came to you to do it. You're too busy. I worked on the second problem and came to you. You're too busy. I worked on the third problem and came to you. You're too busy. I don't have any more problems to work on. What do I do now? I'm standing near you. Now what happened? After an hour, you have time for me. Otherwise, I would have come after a month. They have released the actual results to the public domain, the Israeli Air Force, on that thing. And they showed, and they released the average lead time from the minutes that the problem was identified until it was finished. Not from the minutes that it was assigned to the engineer, but from the minutes that it was identified, because usually there was quite a lag until it was assigned to engineer. And they've released the results month by month. First month, it's about 135, a little bit over it, and it goes down, down, down. In 5 months, it was less than 30 days on average. Less than 30 days. How much more engineers were needed? 0. But something else have happened. Overtime went to almost 0. Why? You understand now, first of all, that the lead time can shrink drastically without changing the capacity. Because remember, the things that kills the lead time is not the time to actually work, but the time from beginning until the end. And when we are doing bad multitasking, this lead time goes to the sky. But actually, the whole work was done, not just that the whole lead time would shrink, but there was needed less overtime because the setup was saved. Is it understood, yes or no? Even though from time to time engineer was waiting. Okay, I understand that you are busy now, so I'll wait for you. What is then? What can we learn from it? What is a solution for the bad multitasking? We have to understand what we want is not to save the time per the task. What we want is to save the time from the minute the task starts until somebody else can work on it. The lead time is unrelated to the actual time working on the task if we have bad multitasking. That's the times that we want to shrink. And in order to do that, since remember, in a multi-project environment, we are dealing with a matrix. The only way is what? To reduce dramatically the number of tasks open to be worked on by each resource, even if you have to do it by brutal force. Is it understood, yes or no? Now it's obvious. But how do you do it when you're not dealing with one department, but with projects crossing through many, many departments? Where is the place to anchor the mechanism? What mechanism are we talking about? The mechanism of staggering the projects, not enabling too many tasks per resource to be available. In other words, we have to stagger the projects. As a matter of fact, intuitively, we can understand that this will help. Have you ever tried to see 3 people trying to go through a relatively small door at the same time? They're getting stuck in the door. Eventually, they will come out crippled. If you will allow one by one to go, the last one will finish earlier, and they will come, you know, civilized, come out. We have to stagger the projects. How do we do that? Where is the anchor? Because let's face it, from one hand side, we are talking about what? We don't want to launch a project into operation just so that it will be stuck there. We also don't want that not only that it's getting stuck there, by the mere fact that it's there, it's increasing the bad multitasking. But on the other hand, if we stagger the project too much, we will create starvation. There will not be enough work to these people, and these people are expensive and we don't have too many of them. So where can we look for the balancing point? How do we know if we stagger correctly or too much or too little? Where is it? Well, I think that to find the anchor for the staggering is relatively easy if we just have the courage to ask the right questions. The first question is, where are the projects most likely to be stuck for the longest time? Where? Where? At the department which is most loaded. Correct? Fine. Let's ask another question. Where are the projects most likely to cause bad multitasking? Where? At the department which is most loaded. Correct? Third question. Where is it most important to exploit the resource? Where is it most important not to waste the resources? It's obvious, right? The department which is most loaded. Have you noticed something? It's obvious now where should be the anchor. We should look on the department which is most loaded. And that should be the place where we determine the staggering. What's the meaning of the staggering? This department, okay, these people are working now on this project. Try that they will finish as much as they can from this project. Second project, third project, and so on. Don't these people in this department to jump between projects just so that the person in charge of this department is okay with all the project managers. Is it understood? Here is actually where the biggest fight is taking place. Why? How many people I need in order to do your project? There is many times there is not a deterministic number. 3 people, 4 people, 6 people. Okay, 8 is too much. 6 people. Now usually what's happening, I'm giving you 6 people. Here's a new project. Give me 2 people back. Here's a new project. Give me 1 more back. If we do that, what happens immediately to bad multitasking? It starts to be horrific. Which means when we are talking about staggering the project, it means how many people really is the best for your project? 6? Okay, all 6 on you. The other project is left with nothing. Good. Only when they finish, the other project goes in. Is it understood? Yes or no? Now, do you think that this is so easy? No, why not? Everybody agrees with the logic. But you know what? My project is a first. Yes, we understand that even the last project will be finished much earlier than today. But you know what? I don't want to be the last. I want to be the first. And here's a real fight. Especially the fight is don't spread the resources too thin. Concentrate the effort, because otherwise you'll get bad multitasking. That's where the real fight is. It's not the fight with the people. It's not the fight even with the department. It's the fight with the top bosses in charge of the projects. That's where the fight is. Thank God that most of them are very sensible. More than that, they are desperate as well today. So we can do it. But that's not enough. Look on the following. We have solved the problem of bad multitasking on the most loaded department. This department, by the way, is not a bottleneck. Much safety there that as long as we work conventionally, it's far from being a bottleneck. There is immense amount of safety. Now we expose it. Yes, we've reduced the bad multitasking there. What about all the other resources? The bad multitasking that goes there is so big that it will dwarf the problem. So we'll do it everywhere. If you do it everywhere, we are dead because of the synchronization problem. What you have to do is the following. If, for example, we have decided that the second project is not starting now on this department, it's after the first one, fine. But now do the following. Look on the project as one thing. And if we moved one task of the project, the whole project moves with it. Don't say, okay, this task is really going to be done in 3 months from now, but why won't I start now on the other things? Because if you start now on the other things, what do you create in terms of bad multitasking on the other departments? So if you staggered on the most loaded department and you moved a project there, you moved tasks of a project there, the whole other tasks of the project moves with it. By doing so, what did we gain? It's not just that we've reduced bad multitasking in one department. By staggering on the most loaded department, we have staggered on all departments. We've reduced drastically the bad multitasking everywhere. Is it understood? Yes or no? How many departments do we have to do it? Take the most loaded department, do it. Now, if you have still many projects that does not go through this department at all, for them, choose another department. If all the projects or most of the projects are going through that department, good enough, only one. But remember, when you move a task, the whole project moves with it. All the other tasks moves with it in time. What are the results of doing such a thing? Well, reality shows that it's working unbelievably well. But if we want to get some quantifiable things, let's see what happens on the simulator, the same projects as we've done before. When we do only one thing, only one change, we just stagger the projects that we talked before. Remember what was the result before? All these three projects have finished somewhere around the 370 days, 50% chance, and if we're talking about 90% chance, it was about 430 days. If we simulate the exact same project with the exact same resources, with the exact same Murphy, we don't change the Murphy in the computer at all. The only change that we've done is staggering. Remember what's the meaning of staggering? I'm starting some of the project later than today. Have you noticed how crazy it is? If you want to finish earlier, let's start later. Yes? Let's see what is the results. Look at that. The first project, 50% chance to finish in 155 days, not in 370. No wonder, because we gave him the priority. The second project, 302. The third project is also not worse than before. It's also good. Is it understood? Nobody was paying anything. Some have gained tremendous. Of course, the temptation now is to say, wait a minute, it works so well, we still have more than one task at a time in so many departments, let's stagger on the other department as well. Don't even dream to do it. Why? First of all, because you've taken already the majority of the effect already. Second thing, you will start to do it in every other department, and you will give the impression that the solution for Q is by planning, replanning, replanning. Now the queues will pop up and down because of Murphy. If you will do replanning all the time, you will create such a chaos, such environment of chaotic environment where the variances are spread everywhere that nothing will come out. Yes, we want to improve more. This is not enough for us. But not by doing a second drum and a third drum. See, this staggering we call still the drum. There's so much room for improvement. Remember what we've talked before the break? We've shown that the problem is not just bad multitasking. Bad multitasking is huge. But the problem exists also in each project. Remember what we've shown in each project? Okay? Each task is buffered, and because of it, student syndrome, because of it, Parkinson law, and we wasted the safety. That was for a single project. What should we do there? We have to realize the following. We actually don't care if a task will not finish on time. We care if the project will not finish on time, which means whom do we have to really protect? Not the individual task, but the project as a whole. Today, when we are asking estimations and then we will come and judge you whether or not you have done it, we are forcing the organization to protect each task individually. Is it understood? Why do we do it? Why don't we take the power that we know that exists? It's called statistical fluctuations. When we are talking about discrete events, one after the other, do average out. In a line, they do average out. Which means, if we will try to protect the performance not of individual tasks, but of list of tasks, we need less protection to protect the completion of all of them together, less protection than what is needed to protect each one separately, provided that we'll succeed to eliminate the student syndrome and the Parkinson law. In other words, provided that we'll succeed to change human nature. That's all. It's not to change human nature. It's to change how we force people to behave. We force them to behave like that. Because show me one person in the project that doesn't realize that what's really important is to protect the performance of the project as a whole, rather than each task. Now, how do we do that? Here, I must warn you against the tendency of being super sophisticated, because we understand one thing. One thing is we have to take the safety embedded in each task and to put it at the end, because we want to protect the performance of the project as a whole, not the project of each task. And immediately the question is, how much safety can we take out? How much safety is there? And what is the usual tendency? Okay, let's find out how much, if we are saying, if a person said to us 20 days, how much really safety exists in these 20 days? And let's do a survey. This is a recipe for failure. Go to a person. Say, you said 20 days. How much net time do you have there? What do you think he will tell you? 20 days. 18 days. Do you think that he will tell you 9? He himself doesn't believe in 9. He thinks it's about 20 days. Why? Extrapolating from his experience. And his experience was 20 days was not sufficient. So you cannot get an answer for him. If we want to do statistics, remember what we said. It's not these beautiful graphs that we are getting. We are getting the result of the student syndrome and of the Parkinson law. We're getting such peak. We cannot get this information. More than that, the question starts to be, fine, if we take the safety from each one of the tasks, how much safety now we need to put at the end? Yes, less than the summation of all the, but how much? Now, God forbid that you will talk with statisticians and mathematics and so on. Why? Because the real answer depends on the shape of the distribution of these statistics. Anybody knows this shape in reality? No. Are we going by measuring to find out what's the shape? Forget it. Because until we'll accumulate enough information, reality will change. What we have to understand is, forget this accuracy. There is no need for any accuracy here. Remember, the problem came from what? By the way that we manage, we impact behavior of people. What was the killer? The killer was that we induced the syndrome of the student, and we induce work expend to fill up the time, the Parkinson law. So what we have to ask ourselves is, how much safety should we take out from each task? And how much safety should we put at the end so that the student syndrome and the Parkinson law will disappear? All of a sudden, we're asking ourselves a question in psychology, not in mathematics. Isn't it interesting? How come? Because we're dealing with organization based of people, not of computers. What is a big surprise? Well, let me ask you something. If we understand that as long as we complain that in projects we have a lot of uncertainty, it must mean that we have a long, long tail in this distribution. Everybody agrees with that? What does it mean immediately? It means that the difference between 50% and 80% is very large. Correct? Yes. What's the difference between 50% and 80%? That's a safety. We know that in reality it's much more than 50%. But that's not the issue. The issue is that when I'm coming and asking a person how much time can I cut, if he's really collaborative, he will agree to 10%. Why? Because he's conditioned for survival. We want to eliminate the student syndrome. If a person really believes that he doesn't have sufficient time, that maybe he has 10% safety but no more, and we will cut the time to 1/2, do you think that we'll have student syndrome? Do you think that people will be under the impression we have plenty of time? Not at all. So cutting in half, even though it's less than the safety there, is more than enough to eliminate the student syndrome. But remember, we cannot do it unless people understand why we do it, and unless people totally convinced that management is really involved. In what sense management involved? That management really understand that this time that we took does not mean we are going to finish in this time. It means at best, in half the cases, we are not going to finish in time, and don't come to me and complain then. Are you with me, yes or no? Because if people do not believe in that, if people think still that management will come and complain, they will never collaborate. So if we talked before that the problem was to stagger because of top management, here's a much bigger problem. Because here we have to talk with every person that is involved, convincing him, cut the time in half. Don't worry, we don't expect you to finish in that time. We know that there is 50% chance that you will not finish on time, and we are not going to make a fuss about it. More than that, we are not going to take all this time and commit to the end client. We are going to take most of the time that we took and still have it in the project at the end. Is it understood, yes or no? We are covering the performance of the whole project rather than covering the performance of each task. You try to do your best, but we don't expect that you will finish on time. As a matter of fact, we know there is about 50% chance that you will blow it. Big! But we are covering with a lot of safety at the end. How much safety? All the time that we are taking from each task, we are putting at the end. Do we need so much at the end? No, because statistical deviation now will average out. Because when we are cutting the time in half, it's not only that we took out the student syndrome, we took something else out. What? The Parkinson law. Because now, since you know that we don't expect that you finish it on time, and the time allotted, you don't have to go out of your way to fill up the work. And when somebody finished at the time and it's passed, the other person doesn't think I have all the time in the world, I don't have to start right now. So the advances are also moving along the path. Because of that, we are getting that statistical deviations are averaging out, which means we don't need to put so much at the end. Will it behoove us to put all this time at the end? The answer is no. I'll tell you why. Because the people in the project wants to see that there is a purpose for what they are doing. And what is one of the purpose? Shrink the lead time. Which means if you want to be paranoid and at the same time to show that we are doing things and at the same time to take an action that will take out the student syndrome and the Parkinson law, put at the end only half of the time that is left. In other words, you took half of the time, don't put all of it at the end, use only half of it. And the other half is a shrink in the lead time. Not bad to start with. Wait. How do we organize all of it? Wait, we have now a spaghetti in our head. So let's take it step by step. How can we focus what we've just said? Oh, there is some things that we've said in the previous sessions that will help us to focus. Remember the 5 focusing steps? Why won't we go on to that? That will give us some. What is the first step? Identify the system constraint. Look, what we want here is to finish the project in the given content, in the given budget, to finish it as quickly as possible. What prevents us from finishing it early? What is a constraint that prevents us from finishing it early? Well, it's something called critical path. Everybody knows it? No, it's not critical path. It is critical path. It's not critical path. I'll tell you why I'm confused. When critical path was invented, and this is about in the 50s, the definition of critical path was beautiful. What are the things that dictates the entire lead time of the project? It's the longest chain of dependent tasks. And this was defined as the critical path. And this is perfect. Unfortunately, the first places that were used, like in the Polaris program, over there was no problem of resources. These projects were so important that as many resources you needed, you got. Because of that, the notion of critical path became, in the literature and in reality, the longest path. For example, if I'm taking this project, what is the longest path? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or if you want, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the longest path. 6. Do you see it? Wait a minute. Is it really the longest path of dependent tasks? This dependency is only design or structure dependency. There is another dependency, which is resource dependency. I have to do that, and I have to do that, but it's the same resource. So now one task have to wait for the other task for that resource to get free. And if we're looking also on the fact that dependencies are due to resources, what is now the longest chain of dependent tasks? Look on that. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is this and this are done by the same one. 5, 6, 7. Is it understood? Yes or no? So if I'm going according to the original definition of the constraint, the longest chain of dependent tasks, I'm not getting critical path, I'm getting something else. Because look on that, it's jumping from one path to the other. As a matter of fact, every project manager learned it from reality. As a project moves, the critical path jumps. Oh, well, he blames Murphy. It's not correct, it's not Murphy. It is these dependencies that are jumping it from one place to the other. Due to that, I decided, fine, if I want to stick to the original definition, which I totally accept, I have to change the name. And I don't call it critical path, I call it the critical chain. Critical chain means the longest path of dependent tasks. But the dependency can be either structural dependency or resource dependency. Is it understood? Yes or no? So here I've identified the constraint. This chain is the one that dictates the minimum time that I can finish the project. What is the second step? Second step was exploit the system constraint. What's the meaning of exploit? Don't waste it. What we've seen so far is we're wasting it. How did we waste it? We wasted the time by putting safety in each one of the tasks. Where did the safety came from? The original estimations. And that's what caused us to waste it. What should we do? We just said, let's take out part, at least part of the safety from each task, which will enable us to put the safety at the end and still have spare. And the rule was what? Cut the estimations to 1/2. Explain to everybody, I don't expect you that you'll finish in it. Okay? I know that there is 50% chance that you will blow this estimation to the sky high. But I'm taking it out and I'm putting at the end the buffer. How much? It's not the total time that I took, it's less. And if you notice what happened is, before that I had promised 140 days. Now I took each task, cut it to 1/2, but I put a very large buffer at the end. Still, I will promise now about 115 days. But I have huge safety at the end. One of the things that we have to convince all the people involved is that top management will not trim this safety. And you can promise they will not believe. But this must be etched. Don't touch this completion buffer. This is what is called the completion buffer. The rule is the completion buffer should be 1/3 of the total time. It's not 2%, it's not 5% safety, it's 1/3 of the total time. Why? Because these estimations have very high probability, each one of them, of not meeting it at all on time. Is it understood? Yes? Fine. That will enable us not just to shrink all the time, not just to exploit the constraint, but really having much better safety. The safeties are now not protecting each task, and those that didn't need the protection, we wasted the safety. It's really protecting the constraint. That's the meaning of exploit the constraint. What was the second step after that? The next step was subordinate everything else. Very important here, unbelievably important here. Why? Most of the tasks are not on the critical chain. Most of the tasks are in the other paths, which means most of Murphy is outside the critical chain. But if there is a delay outside the critical chain, it will, because everything is integrated, it will impact the critical chain itself. This is not subordinate. What's the meaning of subordination? Don't allow delays due to Murphy that occurs in the other paths to impact the time of the critical chain. Which means what? Everywhere that something enters into the critical chain, at the point of entry, what must I see? Buffer, a safety. Is it understood? Yes or no? Where am I going to take this safety from? Oh, I know where from. From the safety that was in each individual task. What will be the rule? The same rule that we said before. Cut the time to half and put it at the end. This time, what's the meaning of the end? It doesn't mean the end of the project. It means the entry into the critical chain. For example, in our project, it will look like that. Look, here I have tasks that enter into this critical chain, a buffer. Here, there are tasks that enter the critical chain, a buffer. All of these legs are entering the critical chain. Remember, this is integration. There is arrows here, right? Before they enter integration, buffer. How much a buffer? The same rule as before, good enough. And then you say, wait a minute. Why should I take such a buffer? Let's start it here. Don't. What will happen if you start it here? You will increase bad multitasking. You have enough safety here. You are enough paranoid. Don't be hysterical, because everything will go down the drain. This is the heart of it. Concentrate the safety where it really protects what we want to protect. Two places. One is to exploit the constraint, to exploit the critical chain, creates a completion buffer. The other one, in order to subordinate everything, not to allow Murphy to enter into this sensitive area, create the feeding buffers. Is it understood? Now let's see what are the results. Once again, reality is proven to work phenomenally well. If we want to have some quantification, once again, let's use the same simulator with the same Murphy, the same resources, the same project. The only difference is that even though we didn't change at all the Murphy, though we didn't change at all the random number generator, we just make the estimations to be different without changing the random number, which means we put the estimation to be half and we put half the buffer at the end, exactly according to what we said here. We didn't change the simulator of what will be the real times that will be. Let's look on the results. Project 1 now, 50% chance, it's 111. How much was it before? 155. Look on the last one, 50% chance, 210. How much was it before? Quite nice, right? But much more importantly, look on the last, on the 90% chance. If the last one, in our things, is showing now 240 days, relative to where we started with, that the last one showed 430 or whatever days, what is the meaning? Not only that we've shrunk drastically the projects, we have revealed capacity. We can now put more projects into the pipeline with the same people. And we didn't ask them to work differently or faster or to work more overtime. But more than that, look, what was the original promise? The original promise was, for the first project, 140 days. Now we have quite a good chance of meeting it. And when we see that we don't, we have to jump through hoops. Because still, there is a good chance that we'll miss it. So maybe we can do something more. Maybe we can do something more. Of course we can. But now, if we are staggering the projects, and at the same time, each individual project, we are focusing, concentrating the buffers where they should, now, all of a sudden, we create something beautiful. We create the opportunity for separating planning from execution. Let me explain what I mean. still Murphy hits us. Still have a situation where the same person have two different tasks that he can work on. Which task should he work on now? What's the answer? Maybe I will tell it to you in a different way. Suppose that one task that I can work on now have eaten half of the project buffer, completion buffer of one project. The other task have eaten only 10% of its corresponding completion buffer. Which one should I work first? You don't have to be a genius to answer that, right? What about the following? One task that I'm working on have already created, consumed 20% of the completion buffer. By the way, not because of me, but because of people who worked on it before that. Okay? Doesn't matter. Right now, already 20% of the completion buffer have gone. Another task is not going directly to the completion buffer, it's going to a feeding buffer. In other words, it was not a task on the critical chain. But this feeding buffer is eaten, already consumed 80%. On which task should I work first? On the one that creates now 20% consumption from the completion buffer, on the task that already consumed 80% of the feeding buffer? Which one? Think. 80%? No. I'll tell you why not. Only after we have exhausted the entire feeding buffer, we ate all 100% of the feeding buffer, only now this task starts to eat in the completion buffer. Which means any consumption of the completion buffer is more important than any consumption of the feeding buffer. Now what do I get? I get something marvelous. I'm getting the priorities. So me, as a resource or managing resources, what do I need to know in order to decide you have to work here, you have to work here? What I need to know is exactly how much of each of the tasks that I have are eating in the corresponding buffers. Each task is feeding only one buffer. Either it feeds directly the completion buffer, if it is on the critical chain, or if it's a feeding buffer, but no more than one. Correct or not? Look at how beautiful it is. If you just give me all the time this information online, I know now what to do. I can now decide. More than that, if I see that I've eaten too much into a completion buffer, 80% are already eaten, and the project is only halfway, now I can go and say, fellas, I need here resources. Will I have a problem to get it? No. If I am responsible now of the task that endangers the whole project, remember, nobody else is. It's only me. It's not everybody comes and shouts. It's only I who come and shout, and I can show it. Do you think that I will get any problems of getting more help? No. It's not everybody shouting anymore. This must be live online, so that every project manager must get information which task is now responsible for the biggest consumption of the completion buffer. That's the place that the project manager should concentrate on. That's the one that endangers the whole project. Each resource manager have to know each one of the tasks that I now have in my department, which one is endangering and to what extent its corresponding project. And if I have it all the time, which is not a big deal in our day and age of computers, I can now make on the fly sensible decisions like when to move a person from one project to the other. Because moving a person from one project to the other is not bad. It's bad only in one sense. If by moving it I didn't help any project, this is bad multitasking. If by moving it I did save a project, this is perfect. Only when I have concentrated the buffers in the right places, only then I'm getting the mechanisms that enable me to separate multitasking, which is essential, from bad multitasking, which is devastating. What will be then the results if I will have such a system in place? Do you want to see what the computer is saying? After that, I'll tell you what reality is saying. Same simulator, same projects, same Murphy, exactly same Murphy, exactly same project, exactly same resources. The only thing now is that whenever we have two tasks open to be done by the same resource, It's not done arbitrarily, or it's not done by let me continue what I've done before. The decision is according to do I endanger a completion buffer? Okay? Because if I endanger, let's switch. If not, stick. Even though the other one is screaming without any reason. Look on the results. Now, this is drum and buffer. I want drum, buffer, and buffer management. Okay? If I'm looking on not just drum and buffer, but also buffer management, look what's happening. Look, 95 days, the first one, but 90% chance to finish at 115. When did they promise to the client? 140. No, 140 was before I've done it. Then I promised 115, which means I'm killing my competitors for sure, but now I'm delivering without jumping through any hoops. What about the last one? Look, 90% chance to finish at 210. Do you understand now how much room do I have to put more projects? And each one of them, I'm promising dates that my competitors are absolutely sure that I just gave an empty commitment because it's impossible. Not only that it's impossible, it's easy. Remember, on top of that, I can improve by jumping through hoops. Here, the simulator didn't jump through hoops. Is it understood, yes or no? But what you get is even more than that. Now, there is something which is I can have a sensible talk with many project managers together. Because now I know how to judge the progress of the projects. See what measurements are coming now into the game. Measurements that are derived from that. And remember what is the purpose of measurements. To induce the people to do what's good for the company as a whole. People at all levels, including the CEO. Judging the status of the project. The first thing is where the project is, how much of the project I've completed. We are going to do it by percent of the critical chain completion. This is enormously important. Today, when you say, we have finished 80% of the project, do you know what usually we mean by that? We finish 80% of the total work that was designed for the project. Whether or not it's on the critical chain or not is irrelevant. And because of it, what do we get? We get two things. One is this phenomena of it took us a whole year to finish 90% of the project, and the remaining 10% took us another year. Do you know this phenomena? Very well, of course. The second problem is the following. I have a problem now that creates me, that is eaten already all the feeding buffer. Now it creates me a problem in the completion buffer. I have a real problem, a technical problem, something like that. If I'm under the pressure as a project manager to show that I am moving with the project, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing, it's all considered to be I'm continuing on, where do you think all my attention will be? On the other things that I can still do. And because of it, I will not meet the project on time. So this is absolutely essential. We are going to say, how much of the critical chain have you completed? 60%? Your project is completed 60%. Okay? Completed 90% of the critical chain? Don't tell me that you have completed 99% of all the work. How much of the critical chain? That's the meaning of percent of completion of the project. This is essential. This gives also a true picture. Because when we are saying 60% means, when can I deliver it? How much am I really moving? This is one. That's not enough. You have also to look on the ratio between consumption of the completion buffer and critical chain already completed. For example, I've completed 60% of the critical chain. I have already consumed 30% of the completion buffer. It means what? My situation is good. My situation is even better than my situation when I've started the project. Because the amount that I've finished on the project in the critical chain is more than what I've already consumed from the completion buffer, which means I am more protected than when I was originally when I started the project. My situation is very good. At the same time, if I have completed 10% of the critical chain and I already consumed half of my completion buffer, my situation is very bad. You'll better take some actions. Is it understood? Yes or no? So this becomes essential in order to know should I take actions or not, if the project is okay or not. And by the way, when you're talking with companies which are on project management the TOC way, you will hear from them all the time things like that. Okay, we finished already 80% of the critical chain and we ate only 10% of the buffer. And they're saying it so proudly and so confidently that they will finish on time without any problem. Okay? But if you don't understand their terminology, you don't understand where it's coming from. But that's not enough. Many times projects takes a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you have to have a more timely indicator to know whether or not you are moving good or bad. These are average indicators. So my recommendation to you is also look on the rate of consumption of the completion buffer. Let me explain what I'm saying here. The completion buffer is 1/3 of the total ITER. Look, for example, every month. For example, in this month, there was 21 days working. In that month, that there were 21 days working, how many days have you consumed from the completion buffer? If you consumed less than 7 days, it means you are improving. You are creating safety. If you consumed more than 7 days, it means you are eating into your safety. Is it understood? Yes or no? And this is an excellent indicator. Excellent. So you react much before a catastrophe will happen. And you are totally focused. The thing which is so impressive is when you see a company with dozens of huge projects. And now the standard rule is the top dog, the top gun, is sitting with all the project managers once a month, depends of course on the duration of the project. If the projects are between 9 months and 3 years, once a month. And having a review on all the projects. Now, do you know what the meaning of review of all the project? It is firefighting and it's blaming and it takes forever. Not anymore. Each project, what does it report first of all? How much of the critical chain is completed? Second thing is, what is the ratio between completion of the critical chain and the consumption of the buffer? If the ratio is excellent, fine. If the ratio is a little bit dubious, what is the rate that now you are eating into it? If everything is fine, that's the end. We don't need to know anything more about the project. If it's not, he has to give one more thing, which is what is the exact task that now is the biggest penetrator and what action is taken to rectify the situation. Not 700 actions. What is action on that particular task? Because that's the one that really counts. And what is happening is something amazing. In a company that has dozens of major projects, such a meeting takes less than 2 hours. Totally focused. The whole picture is known now to everybody, which is very important because remember, there are things that are connected between all the projects, which are the resources. So you do want to know what is the situation. Is it understood? Let me summarize what we are having here. Summary. First of all, the thing to bear in mind all the time, you know, like etched in your mind. It's not important to complete each task on time. I repeat again, it's not important to complete each task on time. It's not important to complete each task on time. The only thing which is important is to complete the project on time. Please, don't confuse the two. This means that practically what you should do is the following. First of all, take each project and rebuild the PERT diagram. Do you know what's the PERT diagram? The diagram that you've seen here, this task and what's the time is there. Rebuild it from scratch. Why? The PERT diagram as it exists now are worthless, especially in a multi-project environment. Because in a multi-project environment, due to the fact that all the time there is a fight and the bad multitasking, this diagram reflects reality so little that the only time that we do it is when we have to give report to the client. Which means the diagrams are wrong, half of the connections are not there. A lot of things that could have been done in parallel are written there. Seal and whatever you want. We haven't seen yet one case that the SPERT diagram made any sense. You know very well that there are traditional techniques of how to write this SPERT correctly. Please use them. Why? Because it's the first time that these SPERT diagrams will become real working tool all the time. It's not going to be one shot and after a week they're worthless. They are becoming the real working tools all the time. So please, you sit on them and work, do the SPERT diagram again, but do it with all the people involved because you have